What's up, guys? If you're watching this wanting to hear my thoughts, or if in fact you've heard of me at all, it's because of progress that I've made as a new father of two in my mid 30s. So today I'm going to be sharing my best advice for continuing to make progress in the gym or in the parking lot or wherever else you train as a new father. I'm going to be dispelling some of the common misconceptions I see about this topic commonly in the fitness industry, and I'm also going to be combating the general aura of gloom and doom around fatherhood and physicality that you often see. People make it out like your life's gonna be over, you're never gonna make any progress, you're gonna be physically weaker, your best days are behind you. That's all nonsense, and it's so damaging because fatherhood is such a wonderful thing. I mean, kids are amazing. It is awesome to have kids. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and certainly don't let the idea that you won't make any more physical progress once you do let be the limiting factor that prevents you from doing that. If you have a good partner that you can have kids with, I strongly recommend you do, and you can absolutely continue to make progress afterwards. So before I get into it, just do me a favor and do all the YouTube algorithm stuff. I'll just give you a little tricep flex since I'm getting to the end of my bulk. It's been a priority. I think that's been working pretty well. But anyway, let's get into it. Before I start, I'll just let you know this is going to be applicable to fathers, probably a lot less so to mothers. A lot of the same things will apply, but obviously you have all the postpartum issues. That being said, my wife has also been hitting PRs since recovering from two pregnancies, so it is possible, but you'd probably be better off seeking out someone who's actually been through it if you want advice for making gains as a new mother, right? Also, this is going to be a little bit more targeted at more intermediate to advanced lifters. Not all of this will be applicable to beginners, as you'll see. But anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so the most important thing to understand if you're trying to make progress as a new father is that nothing changes. What I mean by that is that the same inputs will still create the same outputs. Something that would have given a given result before having kids is still going to give that same result afterwards. Something that would not have created a given result before having kids is not going to create that result afterwards, right? Now, people are going to tell you that things change, due to stuff like sleep deprivation, stress, etc. And those things are real. You're going to be very sleep deprived, especially at first with a newborn, extremely sleep deprived, and that may very well last through the entire toddler stage. It certainly did for me, and it may for you. So you may not be getting good sleep for a long time, and you may also be stressed. Now, the stress of kids is a little bit overstated, I think. Certainly when you have a newborn, it's very stressful because you're just so worried about them. But once they get past that point, the kids themselves are great. That's not so stressful. I think there is a lot of stress associated with just trying to be a parent in a society that's not really configured well for that. So you will definitely have some stress, but honestly, those things are not going to have that big of an impact. Now, I'm not telling you they won't have any impact at all, but what I am telling you is that the impact that those things will have on the progress that you make is going to be completely swamped, completely negligible, completely unnoticeable, or virtually unnoticeable when compared to the difference that good training versus mediocre training, or good training certainly versus no training at all makes, right? I mean, training is still going to be what dictates the results that you get. If you were doing certain training that would have given you a certain result before, if you do the same training with the same intensity that would have worked before, it's gonna work after. The degree to which it might give slightly less results is going to be fairly negligible. The way that it's going to stop you from getting results is kind of like a wolf bluff charging. If you know about wolves, they are typically going to try to go after some big elk or something and bluff charge, try to get the thing to turn and run and get scared, and then they can kind of pick at it and get, inflict some wounds. But if you stand your ground and you don't fall for the bluff, the wolf's not going to actually attack. They're not going to attack until they get the conditions that they want. And that's kind of how the sleep deprivation and stress stuff is going to impact your results. If it can bluff you into not doing effective training, then yeah, you won't get the results. But if you do the effective training, regardless of all that stuff, you will still get the results. So nothing changes in that regard, and that's obviously a positive thing. It's nice to know that you still can get all the progress that you work for. On the flip side, you only get the progress you work for. A lot of people advise just doing something, maybe you can't do all the, workouts that you want, but just do something. And I mean, there's a time and a place for that. Certainly when you have a newborn, like the first couple weeks, maybe the first month or two, yeah, you have to get in what you can get in, right? I agree. But I mean, that's not going to be for that long. Yeah. We're talking about making progress long term here, because you're going to have little kids or toddlers or babies, toddlers, little kids, etc. for a long time, and it's going to be an impact on your training. So if we're trying to make progress in that period, we need to talk about that, right? So just doing something isn't going to cut it. If like dropping down and doing some burpees wasn't going to give you a certain result before you had kids, why is it going to work now? It isn't. I mean, again, if you want to just get your blood flowing when you have a newborn and some spare time, sure, but thinking that just doing something is going to get you somewhere, no. Just doing something, you don't get any participation trophy for that. So that's not going to work. So you do have to still do something that would have been effective before. The question is of how to fit all that in, right? Because you are going to have time consideration. So, well, nothing changed. I mean, as far as what gets you certain results, the big consideration is time. How do we fit getting results into the time we have? Because most likely you are going to be restricted on time somewhat. Not entirely. Very few people are going to be working enough that they don't have time to make progress, at least once you're out of that newborn stage, right? Most people will have time to make at least some progress, but it's probably going to be more limited than it was before. So the question is, how do we do things that we know will get results in the time that we have available? How do we prioritize that? So let's start from the newborn stage. At the newborn stage, yeah, you probably aren't going to have much time to do really effective workouts to certainly produce hypertrophy or real changes in your ability, right? So how do you use that time effectively to make progress? Well, honestly, the best way to do that is just to use that time where you probably aren't going to be getting those effective workouts you need for fat loss. You always have time not to eat. Now that may sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I mean, if you have any experience with fasting, if you've worked on that tool, because it is a tool that you have to practice, if you've practiced that tool enough to where it's something that you can just use, then it actually kind of makes it easy, Whereas if you are just unfamiliar with fasting, you're not used to it, being restricted on time means, okay, I'm going to be eating, so now I'm going to be forced to make a subpar food choice that's going to make it harder for me to lose weight. It's probably going to be high calorie, not satiating. That's what being time poor means when you don't fast, when you don't have any practice with intermittent fasting, right? I'm just going to eat some, bad quality food and get fat. Now, when you practice intermittent fasting, being time poor can mean, I don't have time. I guess I'm not going to eat, or even I'm sleepy and I don't have time. I don't want to be trying to do what I have to do while fighting through, a food coma. I'm just not going to eat right now. Obviously, all that requires having practice fasting prior to having your kids. So hopefully you're seeing this before you have kids and you have a chance to get some practice in. If not, hey, the best time to start was a year ago, but the second best time to start is now. So why don't you start practicing with that tool so that you can use it to make your life easier? Because if you do have practice fasting, like, it's actually fairly easy to use the busyness of having a newborn to just implement a fat loss phase, and that's what I've done with both of my kids, and it was actually very effective. You always have time not to eat, and if that's something that you've practiced and is comfortable and easy for you, it works great. Okay, so let's move on to training once we assume we have at least some time to train. So now it's time to start training for the progress that we want. How do we go about that? We know that we have to do serious training to get actual results, but at the same time, we're under some pretty severe time constraints. So how do we balance those two things? One thing that you hear a lot is that you should use big full body movements to cover a lot of areas at once. You should do full body workouts. I think in most cases, this is actually a mistake, because doing full body workouts well, like full body bodybuilding workouts, takes a lot of time. I mean, we're talking a very long workout, and large time blocks like that, especially if you're looking at like a 2-hour workout, that can be very, very hard to find when you have small children. Usually the shorter a time block you can fit the workout into, the better. Remember, we're not trying to half-ass a bunch of things. The biggest rule for effective training when you're under an extreme time budget like you're going to be when you have small children is that it's better to it's better to whole-ass a limited number of things than half-ass everything. So generally trying to take that full body approach might be fine for maintaining, but you're not going to get progress that way. If you want to make progress on a limited time budget, because that's your primary constraint, not sleep, not stress, not anything like that, you're going to have to prioritize ruthlessly. You're going to have to figure out what your top training priorities are, make sure you get those done, and when you run out of time budget, that's it. You don't get to work out anymore. So figure out what the most important things are for you to train and knock those out and just forget about everything else, you know? So let's right off the bat start trying to eliminate things like what's kind of at the bottom of our priorities list we need to consider. For a lot of us, I think cardio might make sense there. If you don't have any specific cardio goals, why are you wasting time on cardio? Okay, you can always add it back in for longevity purposes later, whatever. But probably unless, again, you specifically want to do something related to cardio, that's probably a good thing to cut out right there. If we're talking about bodybuilding, you may need to pick entire muscle groups to deprioritize or even, stop training, or maybe just, do one little maintenance session every so often while you focus on other areas. For me, like for example, at various times I've, deprioritized chest, quads, just because I was fairly satisfied with those areas and wanted to work other areas more. Even my trademark traps, I barely trained them recently. It doesn't make sense to take all the time to, train something that's already a strong point when there are other areas I need to train more. As far as that goes, so your priorities list should be composed of, yes, the things you want, obviously train the things that you want to improve the most, but you should also give some attention to just how much time various types of training takes. What can you fit the most of, because you're trying to maximize the results you can get out of limited time. So let's say you really want something, but it's also something that's extremely time consuming, may not be the best approach. Like for example, if one of your goals is to hit PRs in an extremely skill-oriented lift, that takes a ton of time. You've got to warm up, you've got to put a lot of practice in. That's going to eat away at a lot of your time, and even if that's important to you, like that may be the only thing you get if that's your goal, right? So you should definitely try, if you can, to give priority to things that could be accomplished quicker. Like for me, for example, I put a lot more priority on neck, calves, arms. Especially neck is a workout that I can knock out a solid comprehensive workout in 20 minutes or less for neck, whereas if I tried to train something more involved in that time frame, I would just end up half-assing it. So I can get a whole ass neck workout in the time that in a very small time block. It kind of makes sense to improve that area if you're at all interested in it, right? Whereas something like strength in a big lift, that's going to really require specific time blocks. You may only have like one, say 2-hour time block per week, so you're going to have to be very careful about like what you're fitting into that time block, right? You're probably going to have a lot more 20 to 30 minute time blocks. So if you can find some priorities to put on the front burner that really help take advantage of those, like forearms, calves, neck, that's a really great thing to do. Or in a lot of cases, you can do mobility sessions and I'm not just talking about like foam rolling and stretching some nonsense, but like actual targeted, like serious mobility work. And a lot of times you can fit that into a fairly small time frame and still get like an actual workout that's going to make you actual tangible progress towards your goals in that small time frame. That's not to say you have to do stuff like that. Let's say some people already have massive calves. I mean, obviously don't waste time training your calves if you don't need to. But that's just something that should be, in your mind when you're creating that priorities list. But either way, you have to create your priorities list, and if something is far enough down that it, doesn't get training time, then it just doesn't get training time. It's much better to, do effective training for a limited number of things than half-ass everything. I mean, if you say, hey, you know what, I'm okay with my legs, I'm just going to focus on completely upper body and skip leg day. Okay. If your arms are increasing in size, your chest is increasing in size, your back is increasing in size, you're gonna have a hard time separating back completely from, you get what I'm saying. You know, it's better to actually like go all in on a goal and make progress towards it than to try to do everything at once and end up nowhere. Like you'll see a lot of people, you know, with kids try to do some kind of short metcon as a way of getting a workout in. I mean, you know, what are you actually getting better at? Are you getting better at the lifts that you have in that metcon? Probably not. Are you getting better at any specific thing that you're trying to train for? Probably not, right? It'd be much better if instead of just, you know, jumping around and doing a bunch of burpees and whatever the case may be, you just like train neck. You might feel more hardcore because you're doing a bunch of, you know, exercises and breathing hard, but in terms of like actual tangible progress down the road, you might have been better off just hitting neck. Now that's not to say don't do compound lifts or anything like that. I've done a ton of compound lifts. You just have to understand that that's going to take larger time blocks that are going to be scarce, so you have to prioritize them. Like I've majorly prioritized back in this time, and my back has made massive gains, right? But you know that I'm kind of using the one, you know, long time slot that I have per week, or usually it's more like two. I usually have like one that I give to my back workout and one that I give to push arm workout, and then usually try to keep everything else to shorter time blocks, right? But anyway, that's how you just kind of set a priorities list and just be ruthless with it. Anything that doesn't rise to the top gets cut. Another thing that obviously is not going to be rocket science is that you probably want to invest in a home gym. People wonder why I train here. That's why I train here. I used to go to the gym. I used to go to Gold's Venice, actually, which is a great gym. But that 15 minutes each way, like that's a neck workout each way. Like each day I go to the gym, like that 30 minutes, that's calves, you know? So it's kind of hard to justify taking a whole workout's worth of time just to drive to the gym. Now, if you have one that's, I'd say like under 5 minutes drive away, a commercial gym, the lack of setup time because everything's just right there might make up for the drive time. But I mean, home gym's pretty important. I mean, especially to be able to use some of the short time blocks, like let's say wife's putting the kids down for a nap or something, that might be like 20 minutes you get. But if you have a home gym set up, you can use that effectively. So that's pretty much, you know, what I have to share with you as far as how to make gains as a father. It is 100% possible. You just have to keep doing effective stuff, but just know that you will have to prioritize and probably just cut a lot of stuff. You know, this is probably not the time to be a hybrid athlete who's, you know, both training to, you know, run long distances and be a bodybuilder. I'm not saying those things aren't possible to combine together, but I mean, unless you're a professional athlete, if you're working and you have small kids, if you try to do too many things at once, you're probably going to run into some time limitations there. Now, one approach that you could use for that is simply to kind of periodize based on bulking and cutting, right? Focus on hypertrophy related stuff purely when you're in a calorie surplus that you can, you know, take advantage of, and then do something else on your cut. And that's what I've been doing with mobility. I don't have time to do extensive mobility when I'm bulking just because of all the demands of, you know, the body parts I'm trying to increase. But I have a lot more time for that when I'm cutting because I can get rid of a lot of that hypertrophy training and just do enough to maintain while I cut down, right? So that's one way to kind of save time and, you know, pursue multiple goals at once. You could probably do that with endurance as well, you know, just really, you know, down. Although I don't know if I wonder if there would be risk of if you really deprioritize the weightlifting too much while in a calorie deficit and also running a lot, would you potentially lose muscle? I don't know. Anyway, whatever. You get the idea. You've got to find ways to fit stuff in, but there's going to be a limit to how much you can actively pursue. But there isn't really a limit to how much progress you can make in something that you actually have devoted the full time to. So, just to recap, you know, prioritize, get the work done. When you do run into those times where you just don't have time to get any meaningful work done, at least you can lose fat. You always have time not to eat. I really hope that you have already invested in building that tool of intermittent fasting so that you can take advantage of those times and make them into a positive rather than a negative. And on that note of preparing, I hope you've also got done weightlifting enough that it's a passion in your life, and it's going to be one of those things that when your time is heavily constrained, that you choose to fill your time with. That's that's been a huge thing for me. Like I knew, like if I only get 3 hours of free time this week, those 3 hours are going to be weightlifting, and you'll have time where you have very limited free time, and if it isn't something that you want badly enough that you're going to fill that super limited time you have with, then you may just skip it, and then you're not going to make progress. So I hope that you've made enough progress so far that you're at a place where that's not going to be an issue. But I mean, if you're watching this video, if you are dedicated enough that you want to try to make progress while you're while also raising your family, hopefully I would assume that that's already something that is not an issue for you. Anyway, don't get blackpilled about this stuff. You absolutely can continue to make progress, and like the kids are totally worth it. They're wonderful. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Don't listen to the dual income, no kids types coping. I mean, none of them are fit anyway. You never see fit dual income, no kids people, right? They're always kind of DYL. Like, why don't they lift? They don't have kids. Like, what are you doing with your life? You could be like doing parkour and mobility and lifting. You could do Olympic lifting. You could do all this stuff. Well, like, what are they doing with their lives? They just like drink craft beers and travel. It's like craft beers aren't even good. Anyway, we're getting off topic, so I'm going to conclude this video. Thank you very much for watching. Go out there, try to find a good partner, try to have kids, and try to be the best role model that you can be for them, both physically and mentally.